Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something truly fascinating from our source material, a massive hidden victory that literally spans the entire timeline of human history. When most of us think about the biblical event of Pentecost, we just picture it as this historical moment in the ancient world, right? We think of rushing wind, tongues of fire, and that's kind of it. But what if we've been missing the bigger picture the whole time? Our source today sets up this absolutely profound premise. Pentecost isn't just an event, it's an architectural triumph. It's the grand climax of a cosmic story of rebellion, and it accomplishes way more than we usually give it credit for. Ultimately, this is a victory that completely redefines exactly who we are. Okay, let's dive right into this. The source anchors its whole message with a pretty startling question right out of the gate. Do you even know what you are? I mean, really? It's a brilliant way to kick things off because the claim here is that the Creator's absolute greatest victory isn't some abstract theological concept, and it definitely isn't a building made of stone. The victory is literally what he has made you to be. But to really wrap our heads around what you are right now, we actually have to travel way back to the original blueprints. We need to look at what humanity was built to be in the first place and exactly where the architecture went so terribly wrong. If we lay Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis 11 right side by side, this striking structural contrast pops up through just a single phrase: let us make. God's original design was breathtakingly personal. He wanted to take everyday dirt, earth, and clay and form living temples for his spirit. But humanity, well, we completely usurped the maker's role. Instead of being those living, breathing temples, rebellious humanity took that exact same dirt, baked it into these idle, lifeless blocks, and tried to build the Tower of Babel. It was literally the ultimate architectural failure. They built this perverse, twisted temple meant to bring God down and contain him, rather than actually worship him. And the bad architecture didn't just stop with one doomed tower. As we move chronologically through the text, we see this deepening cosmic dilemma. It wasn't just humans acting on their own. Humans actually teamed up with heavenly shepherds, these spiritual beings who were tasked with overseeing the nations in a full-blown rebellion against Yahweh. It's like a cosmic mutiny. In response, God scattered the nations and placed divine guardians over these little miniature man-made temples. But the tragedy just compounds from there, because those guardians rebelled too, greedily soaking up the worship for themselves. And the end result of all this chaos? Humanity was left entirely, utterly corrupt. The blueprints were just completely shredded. Which leads us to this stark question staring right back at us from the source text. How will our God save us? It creates this intense micro-mystery. Because think about it, the dilemma is just massive. How could we, this deeply corrupted clay, these idolatrous baked bricks, ever possibly build something good? Fallen man only really seems capable of building rebellion. The raw materials are totally ruined. So how in the world does the great architect respond to a creation that has completely botched the project? Tracing this out chronologically, we start at creation in Genesis 1, move right into the massive rebellion at Babel in Genesis 11, and then, the pattern brings us straight to the cross and finally to Acts 2. Now, naturally, fallen humanity expected God to save us with grand worldly successes or, massive displays of conventional power. But God does something totally unexpected here. He uses our very reality, our failure, our suffering, as the actual pattern for salvation. The whole history of human architecture leads us straight into the ultimate paradox, which is the cross. Our source drops this incredibly counterintuitive theology here. It says the suffering is not something that we just put up with to get to the good. The suffering itself is the good. It itself is the victory. I mean, think about that for a second. This is a massive shift in perspective. At the time, Christ's death looked to the world and honestly even to his own followers like a complete and utter failure, absolute defeat. But the text argues that the cross wasn't just some roadblock on the way to the victory. The cross was the triumph. God takes the ultimate symbol of human corruption and literally turns it into the cornerstone of redemption. Now, what's really interesting about this is how it frames what comes next. Pentecost isn't just some random sequel to the cross. No, it is the ultimate direct reversal of Babel. At Babel, you had humanity messing up, desperately trying to build their own legacy, and ultimately just being divided and scattered. But at Pentecost, you have Jesus, the true architect, doing it perfectly to unite humanity as his body. He steps right in to redeem all that bad architecture work from the fall. At Pentecost, the Lord is essentially declaring, "Come, let us remake man and the city bricks of the cosmic temple in our image." And the repair work actually goes even deeper than that. Acts 2 perfectly mirrors and completely reverses the very first fall in Genesis 3. Back in the Garden of Eden, the Spirit rushing in brought this devastating judgment of shame, which resulted in humanity being sent away into exile. But jump forward to Pentecost in Acts 2, and that mighty rushing wind returns. Only this time, instead of bringing judgment and shame, it brings a stunning, not guilty verdict. Because of Christ's perfect righteousness, the devastating judgment of Eden is completely overturned. The exile is officially over. So the absolutely crucial point here is what this all means for you. The source text defines this incredible transformation. You are now living temples. Remember those corrupt cosmic spiritual beings we talked about earlier? The ones that ruled the ancient nations and demanded worship? Well, they've been deposed. They are out of a job. And in their place, everyday believers are elevated. You are now individually little temples of Yahweh where the Holy Spirit actually dwells. You've been brought all the way back to that original flowless design from Genesis 1. Which brings us from sweeping cosmic theology right down to the nitty-gritty of our practical daily lives. Because you are living temples, the text says believers are now called to be architects of the new creation. But here's the really beautiful part about this. You don't do this by achieving massive worldly fame or, building literal skyscrapers. You do this through your everyday vocations, your daily grind, your ordinary work, and yes, even your personal sufferings. Those are actually the very building blocks of this new creation. To make that totally actionable, the text outlines a really practical path. It starts by sharing the path of your Lord, which gives you the grounding to just hold the line of right confession. From there, you're called to build things for others, working diligently right there in your everyday earthly vocations. And finally, through all of it, just cling to Christ. The promise here is that even in those moments of existential dread, even when your endeavors feel like total failures, you can still claim your victory. Why? Because those seemingly failed efforts are grafted directly onto Christ's cross to yield an eternal, lasting good. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative question to consider today. Will you remember your baptism, that exact moment you were formed into a temple of the Holy Spirit, and step out as a divine council member of this dark world? Our source ends with a powerful call to partake in communion, to receive Christ's merits, and to fully embrace this massive cosmic identity right smack in the middle of your daily grind. You aren't idle blocks of dirt anymore. You are the living architecture of the new creation. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this leaves you seeing your own foundation in a completely new light.